book discussion Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Before I go into the conversation, just a reminder for listeners, we do book discussions here at the Not Even Wrong podcast for two reasons. One is to keep a record of our reading, and second also because the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And reading is not just a pastime for hedge fund managers, it is part of the job, because reading is conditioning of the mind. Angus Fletcher's research on literature really resonates with us on that front. We believe that the reading of stories, the consumption of literature, no matter which level of literature, we're not talking here just high-level literature, but in general, literature, good literature, can be incredibly useful for the conditioning of the mind, which is part of what we do in the knowledge business. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's February 8th, 2022. This is Krim Dalko. For the day, the fund's up 1.9%. The market is up 1.2%. For the year, we are down 14.4%. The market is down 3.9%. We're underperforming by 10.5%. Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens is a fantastic book, highly recommended. And I want to dissect the book in three themes and talk about them. First, I just a really brief summary of the plot, though, just for people to have a bit of a sense for what's going on. There is a girl which is abandoned in the marshes of North Carolina. She grows up by herself. She has a few friends. She falls in love with people. Her life story goes through that marsh. She is pretty much all her life spending in the marshes of North Carolina, which is, the way I understand, I've never been there. It's kind of like, if you think of the North Carolina coast, there are these big sandbanks, the Outer Banks, and it must be somewhere between those banks and the actual mainland where those marshes are. And the book is actually pretty explicit about what they are. They're kind of like a swamp / vegetative transition from land into water. And this girl grows up in those marshes for whatever reason, doesn't matter. It's a murder mystery, so there's some tension and murder mystery type stuff in there. But in the end, the murder mystery is almost a sideshow. I think it keeps us interested. I think it's a nice narrative trick that Delia uses here to keep us interested. But there's a lot more depth and literature here than just a murder mystery. So I wouldn't label this book at all as a murder mystery. It's actually the first time I see this technique used, where you have think about it more like you have a typical murder mystery type tension. There's a court scene, there's lawyers, there's juries, there's guilty, non-guilty type verdict situations where tension is high, all that stuff, but it's really not the key of the book. It's almost like a sideshow, and I thought that was very interesting. So what are the key themes of the book? Naturalist upbringing, nature as a part of nature here is a character, meaning nature is not just the surroundings where the people are embedded in. Nature is a character, a little bit along the lines of I never forget, the creator of Breaking Bad, the TV show, said that they put the show in New Mexico, and New Mexico became a character. And I think that's true. That show has a lot of, you think of New Mexico as part of the character of the show. And I think similarly here, the nature is a character. There's a beautiful line in the book which says, good and bad in nature are just different shades of light. And I think that goes across the book, this concept of good and bad, which is definitely, depends on it's in the eye of the beholder. As far as nature is concerned, good and bad is a Darwinian evolutionary process. As far as humans are concerned, of course, good and bad have different aspects, religious aspects, moral aspects. And we are led through the book, changing our minds, I think, sometimes about what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And definitely towards the end of the book, you then really get sort of twisted your mind a little bit in terms of you're not really sure anymore. Who are you cheering for and who's right and who's wrong? And I think that's a fantastic work that Delia Owens did here in this particular theme. So the one theme is nature. The next theme, as I said, it is prejudice, a big theme. Justice, the themes of justice, the themes of like I said, what is right and what is wrong is in the eye of the beholder, of course, but in nature, it's different shades of light. In humans, even sometimes also, even though we are I think we live under the illusion that we have a clear understanding of right and wrong and a clear understanding of justice and the law. It's not that clear. And then, of course, there's a theme of love. Almost any book that I discuss here will have a theme of love. I think love is incredibly important for me as a person, as a hedge fund manager, because I think nothing happens in this world without love. Nothing, no excellence. You can't become a professional athlete. You can't become a professional hedge fund manager, an artist. Anything you want to do which is consequential in life. So maybe if you want to go and just work a 9-to-5 job to pay your bills, maybe love is not the most important thing there. But a part of all that kind of existential stuff that we do in life, the stuff that we really care about, the stuff that we want to remember on our deathbed, is all driven by love. And I think in this particular book, this life of the main character of this book, Kaya, is really a life which is almost solely driven by stuff that she will remember on her deathbed. There's nothing wasted in this life. And it's, in that sense, it's a naturalist book. It's a book along the lines of Jack London. I think Jack London is deep in the footsteps of Delia Owens here, because nature expresses itself in, like I said, many different ways. Nature is part of the character here. And you start, throughout reading the book, you definitely start thinking about how denaturalized we are as a society, and how bad that is for us, how bad that is for our mental health, for our mental stability. Of course, there are prices to be paid if you want to live as close to nature as this particular character is living close to nature. For example, loneliness is a price she pays, but it's, in a sense, also she has the ability to still find the connections that matter. Find the connections that matter in the sense that if you really focus on nature, and if you really focus on love as the main vector of what matters in life, you have actually a nice mirror here of, okay, this is the kind of life you want to live if you are focused on the relationships that matter. There are no wasted relationships. In this particular situation, this particular character is so embedded in nature that she's incredibly efficient in terms of the characters that she's exposed to, in terms of the relationships that she nurtures. And this is also, of course, something that happens in nature. You don't see dolphins go out on dates and waste their time and work stuff that they don't want to do, and all that kind of stuff that we humans are doing. Nature doesn't allow for that. There's not enough resources for dolphins to waste their time on things that are not directly related to whatever Darwinian tasks they are evolved to execute. So this girl is incredibly efficient with her time, with her relationships, and she is incredibly good at finding love for herself. Now, she is, of course, and this is part of the book and part of the murder mystery, there are some issues with the kinds of people that she's exposed to, but she herself is incredibly clear about what she wants, about how she wants it, and about what she means when she says, I'm in love. There's no ambiguity there, and I think this is another very nice lens that Delia Owens kind of puts us in. If this girl was growing up in New York City and she was some, PR associate at a large firm, we wouldn't believe that. We wouldn't believe that a girl can be this grounded in what she needs and what she wants. But having her growing up in nature and being sort of exposed to nature in a much more direct way than we all are used to, we start believing that she is actually that grounded. And I think this is one of the big themes of this book, that in the end, if you want to draw a lesson from this, is try to find a relationship with nature. This is not just a pastime. Going on a hike in a Moab desert or living in California is not just a nice thing, or like we say, oh, the lifestyle here is nice. No, it's a lot more important than that. And living in New York City has a much, much higher price tag, or in London or Paris, than we think, because we're not grounded in nature. Try to find your relationship with nature. Now, you don't have to live isolated in the marshes of North Carolina, of course. That's extreme, and it's very, very difficult to do and all that. But you can find your own personal relationship with nature. I think that's a possibility, and I think that's one of the things that I think are incredibly important for somebody's mental well-being, because this girl, this character, the one thing she doesn't have is any kind of mental illness. And I think mental illness in our society is so prevalent because the delta, or the difference between reality, nature, and what we think should reality be, that delta, that difference is widening and widening, and that's very bad for our mental health. I think, just a little side note here, this, by the way, applies also to the hedge fund business. The hedge fund business is exposed to reality. The hedge fund business is kind of like living in the marshes of North Carolina. You are exposed to extreme nature, in a sense that in the hedge fund business, you're not, you eat what you catch. So this is a very, maybe the professional equivalent of living in the marshes. And you have to learn to live with the nature of the financial markets, the nature of businesses. We've introduced concepts like the natural Sharpe ratio. We've spoken about our principles that we use when we invest, because we know that we don't have the right recipe to do the right thing all the time. Nature is too volatile. The right things for nature, good and bad in nature, are different shades of light. So is it for the market. Good and bad in markets are different shades of light. An action today might be perceived as bad, and in long term it's good, and vice versa. We often say that's what the natural Sharpe ratio tries to capture, the idea that we want to be able to iterate, and iteration by definition means that you can make mistakes. We want to be able to iterate fast, and we want to be able to lower the cost of error correction. This is, in general, how we want to perceive, how we want to pursue our investments. We want to invest in companies that have that ability to iterate fast and error correct fast. And I think this applies the same way if you live in the marshes of North Carolina. That's exactly what this girl is doing. She's iterating fast, she's error correcting, she's finding ways to get better and better in dealing with nature, and she at some point is in sync with nature, and that is wealth in itself. The theme of love, like I said, is very important for me, for us, because love is a lot more than what Hollywood shows us, the nice Valentine's Day dinner and all that. That's part of it, but that's not it. What I mean with love is a lot deeper than that. Do things with love. We have a lot of expressions in our daily life, anecdotes in the English language, in the French language, German language, all these languages, where we say things like, you got to do it with love. We cook with love. Why is that important? Well, we can't cook a good meal if we don't put love in it. Love is a word, it's a summary for things that I think, I'm not a poet. Maybe if I was, I would be able to put that on paper or in the podcast. But it's one of those things. I know it when I see it, and I know when I don't see love, and I know when I see love. I see when my son trains for his soccer team, I keep telling him, you got to put in love. There has to be love in there. And even though sometimes it's adversarial, the coach doesn't like him, or the coach plays in a way that he can't express his passion and love, you got to keep going through it. Life is not, or nature is not designed to give you love all the time. You have to find it. You have to go and look and turn every stone and find that piece of that energy, that love that you need to pursue your existence, to pursue your evolvement throughout this Darwinian try and error type thing that we call life. So love is, again, a deep, important vector that we also apply in hedge fund business. You can't do this business if you don't do it with love. Finally, I want to talk about justice, prejudice, and justice. It goes through the book. It's almost, I would say, that's the one part. It's an obvious one, but it's still important. Things like growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s in North Carolina, the discrimination of colored people. Again, we know this. It's a sad story of this country, and it's okay that Delia mentions it. Prejudice also towards people, prejudice towards a person that is different, prejudice towards a woman. So all these things that our society in the US, but also in Europe, where I come from, are still prone to. So these are the kinds of things that the book is alluding to, sometimes mentioning explicitly, sometimes more implicitly. I think we're in a better place as a society. And I think the book also shows, by the way, it goes full circle. It shows that some of the prejudices that we maybe express in life, they're warranted. And sometimes being different is a good thing, and like the book says, good and bad are different shades of light. The difference that Kaya shows sometimes, as exciting as they are, can also be very scary and dangerous. So there's both sides of this coin, good and bad, again, different shades of light in nature. And if you deal with somebody like Kaya, who is nature pure in the instantiation of a person, you will also see the different shades of light, the good and bad. And you better be on the good side of somebody like that. So to summarize, again, Where the Crawdads Sing, a fantastic book that, in my view, covers three main themes: love, prejudice, and justice, and the concept of nature as a substantial part of our lives, not something that we use as a pastime or something like that, but as part of this is nature is a character in our lives. It's not just something that we sort of do at our pastime. It's not something that we it's like going to eat or things like that. It's a lot more than just like I say, a pastime. And I think this is in the sort of in the tradition of Jack London and other naturalist writers. But I think this is definitely a modern application of Jack London. But it reminds me of Jack London. I think Jack London is one of my favorite authors because he has this uncanny ability to expose nature in its real form in a way that is very scary and very intriguing at the same time. And I think this comes across here. Actually, this is, I remember things like White Fang. White Fang, I think this girl, Kaya, could be White Fang. So it's a human impersonation of White Fang. So the wild beast, which is incredibly intriguing, which has a sense of justice that is primal, pure and primal, and a little bit scary, but it feels right. And that's what matters. We have love and we have prejudice and justice. Again, all these things are intertwined, of course. The themes are strong, and the book is incredibly well done also from a technique perspective, because it incorporates tension, suspense, a lot of these techniques that we would associate maybe with novels that are the kind of airport stuff that you read, but then it has a lot more depth than that, and that I think is a great job that Delia Owens did. Thank you.